I'm Louise Richardson, Chair of the Selection Committee. Quite a bit of housekeeping today. I'd like to thank the other committee members, Karen Alpha, Marco Brown, Lisa Derrickson, and Dusty Hewitt, and Hazel Russell. Also, thank you to Card Carrying Books, who support the program by giving a complimentary book to each presenter and paying for the bookmarks we use to publicize these events. And to the church for sharing this terrific space. Book Sandwiching is a program of the Friends of the Library who offer generous funding every year that helps the library do all the great work it's doing. If you are a member of the Friends, you can see Kimberly at the table there. If you were a member, that expired December 31st, so time to re-up. It's just $5 for an individual or $10 for a family, and that gets you into the members only first day of the book sale, so it's a great deal. We had to postpone last week's presentation, which was going to be presented by Randy Hewitt, who is a very popular presenter. For those of you who've been coming for years, you know that. And her husband Dusty's on the committee, so it's a family affair. Right before, or the weekend before that presentation, they learned that their daughter Sydney, who is a student at the University of Vermont, had a growth on her brain, and they obviously rushed to Burlington to be with her. That growth has been removed, and they've done tests, and it's not cancer. It's an autoimmune disease which will need to be treated, and the treatment plan needs to be facilitated. So my question to you is, if Randy can't do it in 2 weeks, which would have normally been the last program in the series, would people be willing to come either the last week in February or the first week in March? So, show of hands? Yes. Okay, great. That's way easier than finding somebody else to do the book. So, I think. Also, it is library advocacy time, and I'm sure all of you read the news and are as troubled as I am about many things going on. If I haven't gotten your picture with my I Love Libraries sign, we love to put these all over social media and just get people thinking about how important our libraries are. So there's that. Also, there will be a delegation from Southern Tier Library System, including a couple of people from our library, going to Albany on February 5th to speak to legislators about the importance of supporting our libraries. We're lucky in the past, both our senator and our representatives have been very supportive. We want to make sure that continues. So over on the counter next to the coffee carafe there are postcards. And all you need to do is put down your name and the county that you live in. And we will collect them and deliver them all. I'm not going this year. Go to Albany, sorry. Also, so all the libraries in Southern Tier Library System collect these postcards, but we always get the most. So just a little competitive. Lots of questions from people about, well, what can we do? This is so troubling, you know, pulling funding from this and that, and will libraries survive? Sign any petition you see, whether somebody shares it on social media or you get it in your email. The electronic petitions takes 30 seconds, goes off. You can add a personal message in addition to the words that they craft for you. And if you're not getting those newsletters, there's an organization called Every Library that does a lot of advocacy work that you could look for online, as well as the American Library Association. More important, you need to call all your legislators. So that means if you live in Corning, it'll be Phil Tomasano, Tom Elmira, Nick Langworthy, who we know is probably not with us, so it's really important that he hear from us. And also Senators Gillibrand and Schumer. We know they're with us, but they need to know we're with them and how much we appreciate the support they give libraries. So those numbers are easily found online. You'll talk to a staff person, or if the phones are really busy, you'll leave a message, but just call and say, you know, I support library funding, and tell a personal story if you want, but it's really important to make those calls.
Louise, I will have all those numbers on the library website.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Okay, that's great. Final housekeeping, I believe. At the end, we need to put most of these chairs away on that rack. We'll have somebody standing there to load them, but if you could just carry your chair over at the end, that would be most helpful.
Leave 12.
We'll leave 12. So sit around and tell they're only 12. Okay, so on to the real reason we're all here. This week's book is North Woods by Daniel Mason, presented by Beth Honadle. This year, I asked our presenters a couple of new questions that I adapted from the New York Times by the book column. Beth's earliest library experiences were at the West Elmira Branch Library of the early 1960s and the Hendy Avenue School Library with Mrs. Bickford, the librarian. And I too remember my elementary school librarian very dearly. Her first formal paid job was a page at Still Memorial Library. Oh, okay.
For the bookmobile.
Oh,
We were our
nice.
own department.
Nice.
Our own collection.
So far, we're 3 for 3 with our presenters starting as young library patrons. We're fortunate here in Corning to have Miss Sue and her staff who offer a wealth of creative children's programming. From January to November 2024, attendance at children's programming was 23,162, which was up nearly 22% from 2023. And is more than twice the population of Corning, New York. As far as a book that had an impact on her life, Beth said Richard Powers' The Overstory is possibly the most amazing novel I've ever read. His knowledge of trees and the beautiful way he told compelling stories about people and trees over generations and across continents and states are wonderful. Beth is a graduate of Elmira Free Academy, holds a BA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and 2 master's degrees and a doctorate from Syracuse University. When she retired from the National Institute of Food and Agriculture at USDA in Washington, D.C. in 2016, she and her husband moved to the farm she'd left in 1972. She's been a professor at the University of Minnesota, Bowling Green State University, and the University of Cincinnati. She's a master gardener volunteer and ends her term as president of Cornell Cooperative Extension after 6 years on the board this month. In her retirement, she's built a park around their home on the farm with a butterfly-pollinator garden, a rain garden, a wetland, and other points of interest. She's planted well over 120 trees. She and her husband have 1 son. When we were discussing North Woods for this year's lineup, the selection committee. One committee member suggested we find a presenter who's interested in botany. Mission accomplished. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. When I read my bio for this, I was going to add one thing too. They said we have one son. Does anybody know what his name is? Forrest. I didn't think of that till I saw that. I go, oh my goodness. So anyway, that's pretty funny. Well, I was going to, in the interest of time, I'm supposed to talk for 30 to 40 minutes, and we've got 40 minutes left, and we want to have time for discussion. So I don't know how long I'll take, because I made the PowerPoint up a few days ago, finished it up. I have no idea how long it will take me to do things. I wanted to ask a couple questions. I know many of you are regulars. I will tell you, my first time coming to Book Sandwiched In was around 68 or 69. It was at Steele Memorial Library. My high school, well, that would have been middle school, I guess. English teacher took us to see Dr. Isaiah Reed, who was an administrator in the Elmira City School District, review death at an early age. Right, about the Boston Public Schools and how decrepit it was and about the racism and so on. It had a lot of impact on me. And I think it was the first time I'd seen a real book review. You know, we all had to do book reports, but a book review was something different. Anybody here who's new to coming to these, or is it their first time? Anybody? Okay, second time. All right. Well, I'm glad. It's good to see. Good. It's good to see some people who haven't been here before so much. All right. So I think I know how to operate this. I did a minute ago. Why is my brain suddenly? Is it just? Can I just hit the shift key?
Left, right buttons.
I mean
This arrow.
it's that one. Okay. Very good. All right. So I'm going to use a couple of cliches to get us through this expeditiously. So the one is, they say you can't tell a book by its cover, right? And you can't. But I decided I can tell you a lot about a book by using the cover and the graphic that was developed by Book Sandwiched In for today's presentation. So let's start with Daniel Mason. He's the author. He's actually from California. But during COVID, during the pandemic, he spent a lot of time in upstate New York. And he found himself walking through woods and saw all these old stone walls, and he saw houses that, he said there's a plaque for everything out here. He said being in California, you just don't see much of that. But there's plaques like this is 300 years old and so on. And so he started to imagine who lived there. That's kind of the impetus for the book, is to take a place and go back. And it starts in the 1600s and it ends today. So that was the impetus for the book. The guy is a polymath. There's no doubt about it. He is unbelievable. He's written 4 books. The first one he wrote while he was in medical school. This is his 4th. One was made into an opera. As you know, it's a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Just amazing what he pulls together. And I can very much relate to his interest in these things of going to a place and looking back. So that's a little bit about the author. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you, because it's relevant. He's an assistant professor of psychiatry at Stanford University. And madness, craziness, mental illness runs throughout the book. And so he relates that too. Quite interesting. Northwoods, a novel. I always think that's interesting when you see a novel and you know you're reading fiction. So I'm one of these people, I have to look things up. A couple of reasons why he might have done that. One is, I guess it's a marketing thing, that, I mean, Northwoods really is like this whole part of the country. So it's to show that it's not a work of nonfiction. All right, that's the easy one. The other one is, and I think this might have been why he did it, I can't ask him, but I'm wondering, around this time in the 1600s, novels were going from being like these romantic novels to more literary novels, and to distinguish them, they would sometimes write a novel. Like, we're better than those kinds, or something like that. So I'll go with that because it would fit. Because what you'll see throughout the book is he has different voices for different time periods. Things are written in different styles. And so, given that it goes back there, that would be relevant. What's this animal on the front? I want to know what you call it. Catamount? What else did you call it? Cougar? Mountain lion? Puma, right? So the mountain lion is very prominent here. Sometimes there's some pictures of some, actual photographs, there's some pictures, there's drawings. Sometimes it's just very subtly in the middle of a paragraph it'll say, and you heard the steps. Doesn't say what, but you know it's the catamount. And I think what it's trying to represent is the unknown, the mysterious, the ghost, this kind of thing throughout. These two apples had nothing to do with the cover of the book. It's part of the branding for Book Sandwiched In, but it has a lot to do with the book. There's apples throughout the book. It's used metaphorically and it's used literally. Metaphorically, there's early on, it's like Paradise Lost, you know, the Adam and Eve story and the apples. And there's a guy in the book, Charles Osgood, who is literally crazy about apples, fruit. And his psychiatrist makes up a term called homomania, and they try to treat him for it. So apples are very big in this book. I circled January 29th when Louise asked me, like, you know, it's kind of carte blanche, you want to pick a day to do it. Happy Lunar New Year, folks. I wanted to pick something. I just randomly not so much randomly. I decided to pick a day that was like way bigger than us humans. You know, like it's something in the cosmos. It has nothing to do with us humans. It was here long before we were here, and it'll be here long after. So, but the other thing is dates or time is very important in the book. Very much about seasons. It starts in June, kind of ends in June. 12 chapters. How many months do we have? And it happens over a long period of time. So time is very important. So those are some of the things that I wanted to point out using the cover. I didn't remember I did. If I were to place it in literature, and when I say, according to Beth, this, I don't know anybody else that looked at it this way. It's certainly historical fiction. You know, that's kind of obvious. And some of the books, I'll just give you some books that I have enjoyed in the last few years that fit into this. The Giver of Stars, about the pack librarians. I just read West with Giraffes. I highly recommend it. I won't even tell you what it's about unless you want to ask me in Q&A. And The Personal Librarian, about J. Pierpont Morgan's personal librarian. Those are some that fit into that. No book fits entirely into one category, but these are how I'm seeing it. And then, for lack of a better term, I'll just say natural history, ecology, a lot of these nature books. So, obviously the Overstory, you already heard how much I love that book. Flight Behavior, about the monarch butterflies and global warming and so on. Burnham Wood, which is, you know, it's an ecological thriller, really, I call it. And Where the Crawdads Sing, which, by the way, was reviewed here, and I read the book because that review was so good. So that's where I would, if I were to put it in some place. And then, and it took me a while cogitating about the book to come up with this, I would kind of place it in magical realism. And the example of the book I used to say I can make this case is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshi Kazu Kawaguchi. And we read that book for a book club. And basically the premise was every time you went to the certain cafe and you sat at a certain chair, you could travel through time. But with magical realism, most things are real. They're empirical. It's like normal. But there's something, think Twilight Zone, right? There's always something like everything's normal except for the kid can move spoons with his eyes or something. You know, it's that kind of thing. But it's not like fantasy fiction because the things that are not real are there to make points about real things. So I'm going to say that, and I made that my smallest circle, I see elements of magical realism in this book. I'd like to know if the author would agree or disagree with that. I think I violated one of the first principles during the presentation. First, I'm going to tell you about the book. I'm going to summarize the book, and I'm going to take a couple of themes just to give you a flavor of them, because there are many themes. I'll just take a couple of them, and then I'm going to show how I relate it to myself, because I very much resonated with this book personally. It has a lot of humor, and the author has said this, it's necessary relief. So because there's so much of it that's very dark. I mean, there's murders and violence and all kinds of things that go on in it. So I'm just going to give you some little snippets to try to, and what I find funny, you may not find funny. So I'll just, yeah, this is, well, I thought this was funny. So there's a character, I told you this, Charles Osgood, and he has this great tree. In fact, he calls the apple the Osgood Wonder, and it is like the best apple you could possibly have. And so people are always wanting to know what's the secret to success. Well, he has a guy, it's called his Batman, which is like, he was a major, I think he was in the army. He's a British guy who came over here, ends up fighting in the revolution on the wrong side, but that's a side thing. Anyway, so he has Rumbold, who's his assistant guy. So, and there's a family named Flood, F-L-U-D-D, all right. So that's enough little setup for this. So people are curious, like, well, how does it get so good? He said, I sent Rumbold to his parts where he befriended Flood's gardener, drank with him, and one night, in a state of pretended inebriation, whispered the formula of the great fertilizer. That was the secret of my success. Truly? Asked the gardener. And sometimes he has me participating, said my faithful Batman. Which is why, to this day, if you are passing the Flood property on a morning and you look into his apple orchard, you will see the diligent farmer, his wife, their 3 daughters, and their grandchildren, all squatting, red-faced and bare-bottomed at the base of the accursed apple tree, thinking that this will be the shit that brings them fame at last. I can just see somebody pulling that. So that's an example of humor, and there's a lot more examples. Varied writing styles. Again, I don't have enough time to read a lot of examples, but I would like to illustrate a little bit. So you've got letters. There's an anonymous letter early on, which is really notations in the margin of a Bible about something that happened, but it's called a letter in here, an anonymous letter. There are actual love letters between 2 men. The one guy is married to a woman here in the States, and he's a painter, like a Hudson River painter, and he has a long-standing affair with a man in Europe who's a writer. So there's his writings. There's, one of my favorite is a detective type style. He's a crime writer. So I'll give you a little flavor for some of these as quickly as I can. So on page 16, this is, this comes from a woman, this is in the 1600s, Puritan. She'd been captured, and she is trying to describe the woman that she's come and is being taken care of by, an older woman. So she calls her my mistress. That's what she calls the old woman who's helping her. As for my mistress, now I was afraid that they might slay her, so I said that she was a Christian who had been married to a praying Indian, that she continued to bring light to these dark forests. I saw that she removed her ring and necklace to her pocket. Then we welcomed them and brought them food, and one of them, these are her captors, he bid me sit near him, and from his pockets took an apple and invited me to taste. And I laughed, and I said, who am I, Eve? For he frightened me so. That night, we slept in the loft, and my mistress closed the trap door and moved over some boards, and I knew it was so that none would come to us unchastely. Not modern writing there. And so there was that. And then some of these, you'll understand the context better when I summarize the book for you a little bit. I didn't want to start out there. So there's a chapter called Murder Most Cold. And when I read this, the voice that I was sort of seeing was, for those of you who listen to NPR, would have been Guy Noir, Private Eye. Right? So picture Guy Noir, Private Eye, a little bit in terms of the style. So I'll read a little bit from the beginning of the chapter and a little bit later. It says, Murder Most Cold. What happens when a trail runs red? A Jack Dunn exclusive. So March is upon us. Readers of true crime will know that I reserve this column for only the most terrifying, bone-chilling accounts to come across my desk, and this month is no exception. But get ready for something different, friends. Whereas I usually take you into the underworld of our great metropolis, her alleyways, her flop houses, her gambling dens, this case, one of the strangest I have encountered in my 37 years as a reporter, brings us deep into the mountains of western Massachusetts. So that's early in the chapter, and then, let's see, if I can find that. 277. Again, there's over 90 characters in the book, so forgive me if I don't tell you who each character is, if their name comes up in an excerpt, because even I couldn't tell you who Doyle is. Okay, I heard the rest of the story from Doyle. 3 bodies had come up by the time they were done. At first, they thought it was an Indian site, but by the bits of clasps and buckles that they found, they figured they were English. Wish we knew more, but the secret, I'm afraid, will be lost to time. A waylaid hunting party? A family grave? Only the woods know, and the trees aren't giving up their secrets, save for one chilling detail. When they looked closely at the skulls, they found 2 with an axe scar and 1 with a bullet hole. I promised you more bodies, right? Well, in this case, I think the killer will escape justice, just as the panther did. Some dark centuries in crime, my friends. So it's a different style entirely from the other, and there's a lot of things like this that happen in the book. Again, a marvel of his writing, that he can write in all these different periods. And I did actually see him talk a bit about the book, and he was careful not to put thoughts in people's heads that they wouldn't have had then. Look at that. The book also, in addition to having humor, varied writing styles, it has poetry and music. He is writing poetry that characters in the book would be writing. There are these twin sisters, and they write a lot of books for, music for playing and so on. I had very little time to get into this, but I wanted to give you a snippet for just how good he is at this, at writing poetry. So I'm going to only read you a couple of short verses out of a 2-page poem, which actually in this book is a fairly short one. Some of them are 3 or 5 pages. All right, this is called from a December Song, another ballad by a pair of grave maids. Now you think that's funny, they're buried under the floorboards. All right, a pair of grave maids to the tune of When Phoebus Did Rest for fife and voice. Now sing us a December song to ease the cold of winter night. The year, we fear, is not for long, as is the day, as is the light. Starts there, and then later on it goes on, and listen to part of what he's talking about here as well, not just the words, what's he kind of talking about. And seizes deep the privy's turd, the worm, the grub, that bird escaped, the buried bodies long interred, the ribs in roots and wreathed, and seizes now the very cold, the glass bulb cracks, the mercury spills, as even sunlight turns to ice, while time itself goes quietly still. Great imagery, and again, back to the seasonality, he's talking about winter there. And it's not an element of the writing, but the book is also beautifully illustrated with all kinds of interesting things. There's photographs, there's a botanical reference thing that's used, there's a page out of an almanac. He's very eclectic in where he draws from. And now I want to talk about the device he uses for the book, which is to look at layers of history through time. Does any of this make, has anybody been to see Mannahatta or read the book? The book isn't this big, it's a doorstopper. But, so, I think it was 2009, I was in New York City for some reason, and I went to I think it's called the Museum of the City of New York or something like that, and this Mannahatta exhibit, and Mannahatta is Lenape for Manhattan. You had this big display, and you could, forget if you could push a button or how it worked, but you got to see what Manhattan used to look like at a certain period in time and contrasted with what we have today. So I remember things like seeing rivers that are there that aren't there now because they've been filled in, or seeing saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths and things like that. So it's really interesting, and I find that kind of thinking fascinating because you can look way back, and I also like to think about the fact that we're just this little tiny sedimentary layer and they'll be like thousands of years above us. The other one, you can't get a good picture of it, so I'll tell you what it is. I was in 2011, I was in Guangzhou, China, and I was only there for a very brief period of time, but got to do a tour, and I was in a place called Beijing Road, and it's a marketplace. Anybody been there? I'll never stop thinking about this. And yeah, so did you go to the marketplace?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I was in China though.
Yeah. I mean, it's the only time I've ever been there. I was there for a conference. But anyway, in the middle of this marketplace, there's an area that's covered with like plexiglass or something, and you're looking down through 2,000 years of markets that have been built over. I love that. I was just like, oh my God, you know, it's just so interesting, like how many dynasties ago this was, and we're just standing on top of all this. We're just the latest layer. So, I think the device you use is always an intriguing one to me, is to look over time at the same place. Now, I know I'm supposed to summarize the book, and I'll do my best, but I'm going to emphasize more the first part of the book and give you a little taste for some of the things that happen later on. And what I'll tell you too is, like, I'm somebody who hates spoilers. I hate them. But you really can't spoil this book, first of all. One, it's good. But number two is that it's not like a mystery where you can spoil it by you find out who done it. You know everything. And you know it early on. The rest of it is trying to look back, other people in future generations, like, what happened here? You know, that kind of thing. Or hearing hauntings or voices and stuff like that. So there's not a mystery that you're going to have spoiled, because it's told you quite early in the book. So I think that that's worth mentioning. So basically where it starts out in the 1600s is that there's this Puritan couple, and they're fleeing the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and they end up going to the North Woods. And they put a stone down there, and that's where they're going to live. And, you know, that's a lot of what happens in the first chapter. Many years later, another chapter, there is an Indian raid, and some people are killed, and some people are captured. There's a woman and her baby, and they're captured. And they are actually taken to that site. So it's the first time you find out that we're going to keep going back to this place in the North Woods. And this old woman, when the young woman sees her, says, well, she looks English, but she's got like these charms and stuff that look Indian. It was a little curious to her. Well, it turns out that the older woman had been the younger woman in the earlier chapters. And that what had happened is her first husband had died, and she'd remarried. He's the praying Indian, meaning I guess he was Christian. And they had a Bible. To cut to the chase, the next thing that happens is that the older woman overhears these new men that come along, these British guys, and they're going to attack some Indian people. And she's so upset by this that she poisons them with a mushroom. And there's a lot of killing going on. So there's axe murdering, there's somebody gets shot, there's poison. So you end up with 4 people dead, 3 men and a woman. So the young woman, where this all happens, takes the bodies and buries them. And then she takes off in the North Woods. Well, one of the guys, the British guys that had come through, had offered her an apple. And she said, no, I don't want to eat the apple. Well, he was eating the apple when he died, when he was killed. what happens is that it was in his stomach, he decays over time, the seed germinates, and comes out like through his rib cage and grows there. That's actually very plausible. There's no reason to think that that stuff doesn't happen all the time. And there's a guy comes along later named Charles Osgood. He's the guy that I told you, he was like in the French and Indian Wars and all kinds of stuff he did. And his family wanted to stay in the military, but he really wanted to be an orchardist. And that's what he did. And he was looking not so much for land, but for the right tree, and then the land would follow. And a young boy who was actually a minister, who was an abolitionist and also kind of a crazy guy, he thought the Bible was stuff that all happened in this country. That's part of what made him so funny. And he taught this at a school. But anyway, this young boy takes him up into the woods, and he finds this tree, and it is like the best. So that's the tree that becomes Osgood's wonder. And they try psychiatry on him. Like, his sister or his brother-in-law, I think, were convinced they got to do something to get this pomamine out of his head. And they were, it's so complicated, but they were having him infused or inhaling something that was going to break this something niculum, I forget what it was called, operniculum or something in his brain to release the bad ideas he was having. Didn't work. He said it was because he had a cold and couldn't inhale it. But anyway, all kinds of funny things happen. You keep going forward. He has two daughters, twin daughters, Alice and Mary. And they're carrying on the tradition, but they don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. Like one is all into clear cutting so they can have room for sheep, and the other one feels it personally painful when she cuts trees down. And one of them wants to have a boyfriend or something like this, and the other one is like, no, you can't be doing that. So anyway, the one sister kills the other, and then when she's dying, they both end up on the floor. And so there's just all these different characters that come along over time. And all the characters aren't people. There is a beetle, and there's quite a bit of sex life of the beetle in there. But the beetle has to do with moving some fungus that killed trees, as part of extinction. So it's just quite interesting. So I was trying to think, how could I convey the complexity of this book and also bring out some of the big themes? And I created this word cloud. I could be the first to critique it, but I think it does a pretty good job. Fire appears in there. So what I did, this is how crazy I am, and I am crazy, I will admit to this. From card carrying, I got my paperback. I didn't realize at home I had a hardcover, I hadn't read it. And then to create the word cloud, I downloaded it on a Kindle and would look up the words that I thought were big time words just to see empirically what it would look like. Yes, I am that nerd. And but what's interesting is, like anything else, you could parse it different ways, because the cougar is here and mountain lion got kind of separated and so on. If you put them all as mountain lion, it would look bigger. But you do get a pretty good idea. Fire is important, woods are important, the house is important, apples are important, seasons are important. These all come out of the book. Oh, someone asked me, why are snakes important? It's the Adam and Eve and the serpent thing. I mean, that's a little bit of it right there. And then they show up as just animals that are in the woods. So that's about it. Interesting thing I learned from the book is the word woad, W-O-D-E, is Old English for woods, and it meant mad or crazy. Yeah, that's where it came from. So just to take a couple of these elements or themes, fire. The book begins with a quote from Nathaniel Hawthorne, and it's interesting because he has ... The ... is the moderns, because I looked at the original, I was like, that's all he took out was the moderns, which I thought was actually pretty cool, right, for his day. To build a fire on Ararat, which is the landing place for the Ark, with the remnants of the Ark. And he started the book, and I thought, well, that's interesting, what's that about? Well, he ends with, the fire doesn't stop. It takes 2 hours, and the house is gone. For a moment, a stillness hangs over the rubble, and then it all begins again. So fire is very important. Mountain lion as ghost. So, everybody was able to name, a lot of different names for this animal. It's also called a ghost cat. He never says that in the book, but that is another word for it. If you read in Appalachian literature, that's often what it's called. It is a mysterious animal in the sense that people are always having sightings of them, or you hear about sightings of them out here. The Department of Environmental Conservation doesn't say that they didn't see them, although they know a lot of them are house cats and other things that people see that they're mistaken about. But what they try to make clear is that they are not resident populations, that they've wandered in from out west or someplace else, that we don't have any resident ones here. The chapter that illustrates is from a guy, I forget his name right now, it doesn't matter. He wanted to turn the house into like a hunting lodge with all kinds of animals, and that was so he could have Teddy Roosevelt come visit. Yeah. Oh yeah, he had some great characters, to say the least. So fire is important. And, gotta pass the mountain line. Hey, I'm not doing that bad on time, I guess. Well, maybe I mean, I did get a late start, you gotta give me that. Oh yeah, the blank is on purpose. It's telling me transition. So what I want to talk about now is kind of relating to myself, if you pardon me for doing this. Tell you a little bit, because it'll be relevant to this. I grew up in West Elmira. My parents had a business on the east side of Elmira. That's kind of where I grew up. But on 67, my mother was a volunteer at the neighborhood house on the east side of Elmira. And one day, a guy that worked there with her, another volunteer, he was an officer, said, "Nan, didn't you and John always want to buy a farm?" Which is true. We always had horses and like animals stuff. And one thing led to another, and they bought this farm. And my only requirement, because I was going into high school, and my father was, they were a little worried, like, how's she going to go for this? I said, well, can I have animals? Oh, sure. Well, I'm all over it. So that's how that happened. So that happened. Then I left in 72, went off to college and all this, and I was never coming back here. I love the farm that we live on. It's 283 acres. It's got woods and fields and ponds. It's got a beaver lake. It's great. But I don't want to come back to this area, and never planned to. But then what happened is in 2005, my father and brother died 4 months apart. My mother had already died, so there was the farm. I had one brother at that time left. He lived in Center City, Philadelphia. He'd been there for 40 years. He didn't even like to walk on grass. The guy walked like 13 miles a day. He never went to our pole barn. He had stuff in. So we were very different. And I'm down looking, because you can look south and see Pennsylvania. It's gorgeous. It's the endless mountain thing. And I'm on the phone with my husband, who was down in Cincinnati at the time. My brother just died. And I said, "Oh, sure, I'm going to miss this place." I go, "Wait, I have an idea. Someday I'll retire. We could come here." He goes, "That's a great idea. I've been coming there for like 30-some years, and I've hunted there." So that's how it happened. It's this thing about fortune, which is another theme in the book. If certain things hadn't happened, what wouldn't have happened in your life? And you've all got stories like that. The thing you never thought you'd ever do. So I am kind of like the poem. So welcome to my woods. This is just any old picture. I took these out of my cell phone, right? I didn't do a lot of research on this. I went into my phone, brought these out. So that's just one entrance in the woods, an old logging trail. That's Wegman. I'm going to show you that I am crazy. There was a potted fir tree. They said it was a Fraser fir. It's a Douglas fir. And it was dirt cheap at the end of Christmas one year. And I bought it at Wegmans. And it was this big. And now, I know it's no big deal, but it's taller than I am. It's really getting tall. And so that's how one of my trees got here. Some of them are quite big. We went down to the woods. That's a John Deere Gator. And I pulled up many trees, dug them up myself. I have tendonitis to prove it. And plant them around the yard. What else do I do? Every year I've been going to the Soil and Water Conservation District over in Bath and get a shipment of trees. I went there last year, and they go, "You again?" I go, "I know, my husband's trying to cut me off." And it is kind of crazy. So this is what they look like in the spring, just like little sticks. By fall, they look like that, and that's Ranger the cat. But as you can see, and the thing behind it, that's the wetland I've been. Because of the climate change we're having, we're getting more water running and rushing and so on. And my husband said, "Could you build a wetland?" I go, "Well, I could try." So I went down to the ponds, got water-loving plants, put it there. And it has retained the water quite nicely. That's what it looks like in the spring. That's what it looks like in the summer. Let's see, what else have I got? Oh, and again, admitting that I am crazy. This is before Louise had ever approached me, so she already knew I was nuts. I would say, you know, I can stop anytime I want. Or in this case, I said, well, just a small relapse. I found a really cool oak tree, and I had to plant it. So it's kind of what I do. And just some more illustrations. We humans try our best, sometimes, some of us anyway, to support nature. The one on the left is a honey locust, came from seed. Do you know they're related to legumes? They're a legume. And they come in these pods, looks just like a bean pod. And I'm growing, that one is actually growing in my house now. Of course, it's a bad house. That elm tree, that came from the senior center in Corning, where they chopped down these beautiful elm trees. And I'd already gotten a couple of their babies the year before. I got the rest of them after that, with permission. I don't understand cutting down trees for no reason. There are times you need to, but I'm always gathering things. Like, February is when I go out shed antler hunting. Are they beautiful? I think they are. And I love this. So you know what that is? What is it? No, don't know. It's a possum. It's a possum. And what I really found, so I saw this possum, and I just have like a pile of bones and stuff that I collect. I have them on this wall by one of my gardens, my rain garden. And then it had been there for a few days, and I looked, I go, oh my goodness, watch this. It's gonna be a little video, so keep an eye on here. Yeah, she had babies in her pouch. Oh. Isn't that way cool? That possum is now going to spend the rest of its existence at Tanglewood. It was such a cool find that I didn't think I should keep it. I thought, well, I'm going to either give it to Cornell Community College or Tanglewood. I called Tanglewood and they were all over it. And right now it's being eaten by domestic beetles to clean the carcass, and then it'll be in the library. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm glad I gave it to them because I think, and I guess they had it out for around Halloween time, and kids were real excited to see the skeleton. Y'all know what that is? What's that? The monarch butterfly. More specifically, it's a male. It's a male because it has those two dots. I'm just showing you some things that just interest me because I really have gotten into them and do what I can to see. All right, what's that? Anybody have any idea what that is? It's a viceroy. It's not a monarch. People look at those and they'll commonly think that's a monarch. If you notice, it doesn't look like the monarch. See, monarch looks like that. This one has these bands. And it's meant to, it's an adaptive feature. It's a mimic. Like the monarch, it's poisonous to the birds. What do you think that is?
Caterpillar.
Well, if you think it looks like bird poop, it's supposed to, but what it is it's the larvae of that. And interesting, like if you follow monarch butterflies, their caterpillars start off underneath the leaf. This hangs out right on top because it wants to act like poop too. It's because it's telling the birds like, you don't want to eat me, how gross would that be? And so it just hangs out there, and the first time I saw one, I went like that and flicked it off, and it hit the ground and started crawling. And I'm like, oh, wait, what the heck? And I had seen this guy the week before, and then I realized, you are that. At the end of the season, unlike the monarch, they don't do the big migration, 3,000 miles to Mexico. No, they build themselves a hiberniculum, a little thing out of leaves, and they spend the winter in there. And they stay right here. And in the spring it'll come out. So just some of the nature I see. Interesting looking tree, right? It's a willow. Came from the Soil and Water Conservation Service. I was growing it last summer. You notice anything funny about it? Look again. Yeah. It's a looper moth caterpillar. So, that's just what we see if you start looking around. There's just so much to see out there, and you're always learning new things. No one can know all of what they're seeing out there. There's just so many surprises. I didn't know about some of these things till last year. I did know about 5 stories. I did not know about their larvae. All right, another segue coming, here we go. So, this is a quote from the book. While I'm talking about this little quote, look at the picture and tell me what you see. What I'll tell you, a little setup is, I've been walking on this property for like 55 or more than that years. And I've walked all over the place. And cut trees, dug up trees, done all kinds of stuff. One day, 2 years ago, I saw this. So think about what you think you see there.
It's a foundation.
So, I want to hear your ideas, because I didn't know either. Okay, for it is fortune to think of all that had to happen so that we might eat, and all that might have happened to prevent it. That actually had to do with 2 people, but I feel like that about this. It's like, I could have walked, my parents were here for years. And my one brother lived there till the end of his life. And nobody had seen this thing. All right, so when you really look at it, let me point a couple things out. There's a wall here and a wall here, which you can't see so well from where you're sitting, is there's a wall back here. And these are flat, so you've got this flat surface, and it kind of goes down like this. You see something here? See something right there?
Mushroom?
Barrel hoops.
Oh.
Got any ideas now what we're looking at?
So snippy.
So here I am, again out of North Woods. Start digging in the woods and who knows what you'll turn up. That's me digging, and, well, that quote again about the woods know, aren't giving up their secrets. I dug down a ways, and there were these pipes side by side, and below that was charred black. It's, what'd you say? It's a still. It's a still from the 20s. You can tell because of the age of things that have been able to date. In fact, I showed it to a woman who's a geologist at Mansfield, and part of her area is like this preservation of archaeological sites, and she goes, looks like a still. And I have found, and I'll show you in a minute some of the interesting things I found. So there was fire there was all these artifacts. So I'm just going to give you a little taste of it, because I think it's so, oops, let's go get that. Oh, come on. Why did I do that? Help me.
Go the other.
All right, so I go back to, how did I do that? I don't know what happened. Just get back to where.
Here, you want to share?
Oh!
Whoops. Whoops. Okay.
Yeah,
now
just
we're
get to the
ready.
slideshow.
Oh, wait, okay.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, let's go to the
Yeah,
right.
go start from current slide. You can do that. Play from, there you go. That's it. There we go. So there we go. So now I told you what I found. I've dug up 4 different sites on there, and I used a metal detector. And this character in the book, the guy who's like the Guy Noir guy, he's using the metal detector. I so related to the guy. Yes, you get obsessed with this stuff. So here I'm digging in the woods. Dang, can I not make that happen? All right, here are some things I found. One of the first things I found was a cartridge from a bullet, 20 gauge, and it's a make that isn't made anymore, and they probably were using it to shoot squirrels or rabbits or something like that. It's not like a murder or something. That is an old tractor seat. Next to it is the thing that you'd see on it took me a while to figure these things, and other people gave me some ideas and figured out, a lantern, like a Coleman lantern, where the thing, the wick comes through, that's the third thing. It's hard to see some of these, but the one is, there's a door handle. The next thing is kind of a hook that, I think it went over, like, because some things you could tell have been strung between trees. There was a hook over, and then maybe the cable went between them to hold them up there. That is a thermometer. And when I was deep into my research, I could tell you exactly what is the point at which alcohol turns into vapor, because they had to keep distilling. So the thermometer is a pretty good smoking gun. That's it's a spark plug, but it's specifically, because there's a spark plug group on Facebook, and I asked them, and it is like a Model A or T or something. It's an old one. Here's a buckle, here's a bottle, there's what it looks like as I'd start to see something. This I brought into the house, another bottle. here's a hook, look at that big heavy hook. That hook is like this big and real heavy gauge. And here's a red light. So, and there were so many other things I found, like, I'm gonna tell you that, oh, a couple of pocket watches, like all kinds of things that are out there, and no plastic. So you know it's not real modern. But I just want to give you a taste for some things that I unearthed doing this, and I'll tell you, it's so much fun. All right, then, same year, I'm walking down a hedgerow that I've been by forever, and isn't she sweet? There were some other artifacts, and we have in our area, actually, a very, like in the whole country, one of the best doll experts. I showed him a picture, and he said, it is German, around 1910 to 1930. And I didn't give him any clues. I said, what can you tell me about this doll? And he said, it's one of two makes. He said, it's called an open mouth something, and he told me how it was put together, and sure enough, you turn around, and you can see the dentition and glued in there. So, yeah, this one character, the guy who had schizophrenia, he kept hearing things, and he was listening for voices that were buried in the woods. And in fact, there is a character in the book who has such a bad secret, she digs a hole in the ground and talks into it because she doesn't want it to reveal it. All right, so to wrap up, the big point of the book is succession. And I wanted to just comment on that real briefly, and I like it. I like it a lot. I don't want you to get the idea that I am pro-invasive species, or not pro-Japanese beetle, purple loosestrife, Asian knotweed. I'm not. I get rid of things. I've got a buckthorn I'll get rid of as soon as the soil gets warmer. But I think we're overdoing it in terms of our obsession with it. In my opinion, it borders on fundamentalism. That as it always was, it'll always shall be. Like, no, you can't really work. That's not how the world works. And so I'll give you some examples. You heard I was at University of Minnesota for a number of years. And I'm a social scientist, by the way, so I'm going to tell you that. But over in the College of Forestry there, they were studying, this is in the 1990s, Georgia trees, because they knew that Minnesota would be hospitable to trees that were currently growing in Georgia 30 years later. Of course they would, because the trees that are living in Minnesota then, they knew couldn't live in the future, and they knew the ones living in Georgia could live there then. Another example, you heard I'm a master gardener. So I went to a training that, because then some people probably know better than I do, Ort Family Farms, they do fruit stuff around there. Shauna Ort came and spoke to our group one time. They're experimenting with figs. Now she said, we're doing that just in the greenhouse, but there's some other things. Yes, it's going to happen. Why would you ignore that and only be native when the native things can't make it? That one of them, I knew I'd love this book when I got to a part where Charles Osgood marveled at the fact that 200 years earlier, and he's writing in the 1700s, there were no apple trees here. The only ones here were these crummy crab apples that the natives had, but there were not apples as we know them today. They come from Central Asia, Kazakhstan specifically, and they got traded through Europe and eventually brought here. So next time one of my friends says to me, well, that's not a native tree, I go like, well then get rid of all your apple trees. Get them out of here, they're not native. I took a class called Women in Their Woods through the Delaware Highlands Nature Conservancy, and we were learning about good woods practices and so on. And one of the women running it said, I'm going to start, she lived in Pennsylvania, I'm going to start bringing some trees that are like 100 miles south of here onto my property because, again, it's that same idea. If it's getting warmer, the plants you have here now, it's going to be too hot and dry for them, but maybe if they were in Virginia now, you'll be able to grow them there. Another example. Here, this is a good one. American beech. I want to use this to illustrate something different. I think there's a big difference between invasive and non-native. We have plenty of native plants that are very invasive. Tall yellow weeping primrose, ferns, American beech, some birches. So just because something is native doesn't mean it's not a problem. So American beech was a problem that we were being talked about. And I went to our woods and as a good student, I go, oh, I guess we have quite a bit of American beach in here. Maybe I should do something about it. So I called and I talked to this expert person who was running this program, and I said, so what do you do? They go, well, the recommended method is you cut it way down, and then they drill a hole in and put Roundup. Then it goes just to the roots, doesn't get out, I know, because like me and Roundup are like real good friends. And so but I thought, well, you know, if it's for the best, if it really just goes straight into the soil, just goes into the roots and doesn't go all over. So then I called a couple months later and asked some follow-up questions. They said, hey, hold that thought, there's something coming for the beach. You know what I mean? So like we got the woolly adelgid coming for the hemlocks, and there's a pine, something won't come in for the pine, there's something coming for the beach. So she made it sound like, so just wait, you might not need to eradicate them because there's something coming for them anyway. And there was one other part of my assignment, and I'm supposed to tell you whether or not I recommend the book. I recommend the book. I'm done. What we should start with. Are there any comments, questions? Somebody read the book? Yes?
You seem to love apples.
I seem to have loved apples?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But Pablo Neruda, a Chilean poet, read his ode to apples.
Okay. I like apples just fine. The author really loves apples, and some of the characters really love apples. I mean, I like apples. I like them, but I don't know if I want to read that book. I do want to read a book, though. There's one about reading the forest landscape, where you can learn a lot by walking through the woods and seeing what's there. And because one of the things is that most of the apples, if you took an apple seed and planted it, you wouldn't get a good apple. But it's through grafting. So if you see some really good apples, it probably meant that there were humans there at some point. So,
Can I comment that about this book is that the title of the book, Woods, original from Chinese. It means house. And the animal, puma, original called by the native Indian, is original from Chinese. It means ma means horse.
yes, I knew that.
Pu
Interesting.
means crawling or sitting.
Really?
Because horse don't really do that. You see a horse, they're always standing up.
Right.
And so
That's interesting.
he's from California. Maybe he has a lot of know a lot about Chinese language.
Could be. I think the guy knows a lot about so much. I mean, that's I can tell you. I mean, thank you for that. That's
Well,
really.
there's another word you mentioned. Pusan is a native and India language. It's original from Chinese. Means pu means white. Su means red.
Before I went to China on my very, very brief trip, I found a book quite a while ago, but it was something to the effect of everything we have came from China. And it was really amazing, like a long time ago, the things that they had that we think we're discovering now. So I think, thank you, that was so.
And I agree that you go shopping, everything made in China, and I agree with the person put more tariffs.
and then he walks out. No. All right, that was great. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
In addition to the fact of the natural world, the land and what's growing there and the apple trees, which is huge, another thing I felt was very, very prominent was house.
Yeah.
House, and we didn't talk about that, because this same house exists throughout all these hundreds of years. And you see it transforming and reducing and transforming. And I just thought that was fabulous.
The book gets added, I mean, the house gets added onto and so on.
Oh my gosh.
It starts off by just a stone.
This yellow house that stands there in the woods. And you know, it's magical.
If I could, do you mind if I read you a page that is, it is so funny. I want to read this as different style, or I could use it for humor, but you might know where I'm going with this. This is in modern times. This is the house now. Now that you know a little bit about what's happened in this place, it's called 2BD, 2BA. I didn't know what that was. It's 2 bedrooms and a bath. Take a step back into the past without sacrificing the comforts of the future. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to buy a true New England treasure. For countless generations, Catamount Acres has offered peace and tranquility to its owners. Recently renovated and returned to its 18th century footprint, this tastefully appointed house can serve as either a stylish weekend retreat or a full-time work-from-home abode. The historic 1760s salt box includes 2 skylit bedrooms, a modern kitchen with walk-in pantry, and a luxurious yet intimate dining room. All rooms have been furnished with state-of-the-art appliances, are fully wired and smart home ready. Charming historical details have been painstakingly preserved from a subfloor storage space, perfect for a wine collection, to the stone hearth, wide plank floors, and it goes on. It's a modern description of the thing, and if you knew all the murders and the lying, there's just so much. There's a woman in there who does seances. Even she admits, not to her clients, that she's a fraud. She can't bring people back. But she says something in there that is interesting. She said, it is a well-known fact that even with the most tight substances, there is space between the atoms for worlds. And I pondered that one for a while, and I thought, that's kind of interesting, because in a way, now this is just me speaking, is that I think it shows the limitations of science and, say, spirituality. Neither one can explain everything. There's this extra dimension that neither one can fully explain.
I would say for people who haven't read it, it would have helped me if I had known that honestly it feels as though the house and the land is the main character in the book. That's the consistent piece. Don't get attached to the characters because you start the next chapter and you were having fun with them and it changes and you're trying to figure out what's happening next. So as I kept reading, had I kind of known from the beginning, I would have said, oh, but I found it so creative and loved it.
I'm glad you brought up the readability factor. So, 2 things. There's a lot of arcane words in it. So I cannot read without having my cell phone next to me so I can look up obscure things. 2, there's almost no dates in it. There's almost no dates. So you have to figure out what time period you're in. Or they'd say the twins are now this age or that age. I have marginal notes where I'm doing math, trying to figure out, and I think I did figure out what year they were born, because I'm that person. Well, plus if you're going to review the book, you feel like you're going to know it as much as you can. So I went overboard. There's a lot. So if you want to pick up a book and just breeze through the reading, you're not going to read this book. Or you're going to find it challenging. So a lot of arcane words and no dates. And there was one time when he goes, well, it is in the 1970s after all. And you're like, oh, well, duh, most of your readers know that time. But, it's a lot of them, like there was a tariff put on. And I'm like, okay, it was the War of 1812. I'm like, couldn't you believe this? Anything else? All right, great. Well, thank you.